Okay, thank you.
Oh, I
Um,
will. One thing, I do not take any statins. No, no cardiovascular drugs. No.
Thank you. Where do you stand on the following? So let's talk about three different things. One, salt, two, oil, and three, the whole food plant-based fats of raw seeds, raw nuts, avocados, and olives. So let's call three different categories. Salt, one, oil, two, and then three, let's call the whole category of fat, seeds, nuts, avocados, and oil, olives, one other category. On those three things, in terms of how it affects heart disease and cancer and our overall health, what are all of your thoughts?
So am I going first? Okay. So importantly, I would encourage everyone who's asking that question to look for randomized trials, look for observational trials, and you'll see some really important things. Number one, sodium, salt is toxic. And so when you're talking about salt, that's potassium. So you have to divide it. And you can get, I don't usually talk about brand names, but everyone asks, what are you talking about when you say salt that's potassium? There's like no salt, coast salt, Morton salt substitute. You can find them. And if you don't have kidney disease and a problem with potassium retention, it will lower your blood pressure and lower your overall risk. Sodium, I know that we drew a level with our hypertension 2017 guidelines, drew a level of 1,800 milligrams per day. But it's one of those, like Dr. Campbell was saying, it's like a linear relationship. The lower you go, the better off you are. Similarly, for oils, the randomized trials, the observational literature, they would all say, and I know there's someone in the chat who said, isn't olive oil good for you unless you're overweight? Well, if you're overweight, there are no good oils. If you're thin with a high cholesterol like me, there are monounsaturated oils that will lower your cholesterol. And I know the last time that we were on, the three of us, I was quoting a recent trial, so it's not so recent now, where Neil Barnard had done a randomized trial of Mediterranean diet with olive oil supplementation versus vegan. And the vegan side lost the blood pressure because the polyphenols in olive oil are very powerful and helpful. Would never get it to someone who's struggling with weight because that 9 calories per gram is just not worth it. But you have to be very careful if you're going to do any oil at all to make sure that you're someone who needs that improvement, blood pressure or cholesterol, and that you're not overweight at all. And make sure that you're reading how much saturated fat, because that will undo your health completely. As I mentioned, coconut oil, any palm oil, anything that has saturated fat. The last one, beans, grains, nuts, seeds, all of them have the benefits of alpha linoleic acid and helping you to get a higher omega-3. You see a lot of omega-3 trials in cardiology with brand name drugs that don't seem to actually improve outcomes, even though they lower triglycerides. So I think the jury is still out on how important that is. But you have some people in the plant-based world saying if you don't do them, you're going to have no heart disease and you're going to have no brains. Haven't seen randomized trials to support, so I'm going to defer to the other two gentlemen on that.
Thank you.
Well, I certainly would agree with Kim on the fact that salt is pretty darn toxic. As far as the oil goes, I wrote a paper that was published in the International Journal of Disease Reversal and Prevention in 2019. The title of the paper was "Is Oil Healthy?" And in that paper, I review the animal studies and the human studies showing how oil injures the endothelial cells. Now, I may be a bit of an outlier the way I feel about salt, because when I have patients with heart disease, I do ask them to stop eating nuts. Nuts have a lot of saturated fat, and I just didn't want those saturated fats to be included in these patients' diet. And as a result, yes, my diet is probably fairly restrictive, but we have actually now several books that have hundreds of wonderful and delicious menus with plant-based nutrition while we are restricting the nuts. But we do accept certainly flaxseed meal and chia seeds, and of course, plenty of green leafy vegetables is a good way to get your omega-3. So that's pretty much the nutshell. I think the reason that our program of disease reversal is successful, where others may fail, is that nobody else is as mean as I am. By that, I mean, I have a chapter in my book entitled Moderation Kills. Thank you, Steve.
What about avocados and olives?
No, I'm not keen on, I don't mind olives, but I don't like avocado. Too much saturated fat.
And olives seem like they'd be in the same category. Why are they okay?
Because there's not that much.
Saturated fat?
There's not much in an olive that I'm aware of is going to hurt you.
So you're making a distinction between fat and saturated fat in a plant?
No, give me the example you're having.
Well, like if a walnut and a pecan have a lot less saturated fat than a macadamia nut, a cashew, or a Brazil nut, are you saying?
No, I don't get into splitting hairs because they all have enough that are going to injure. And if I said, for instance, that you could have 5 walnuts every morning, that's not what people would hear. What they hear is Dr. Esselstyn said nuts are okay. So I leave no doubt.
But do you consider oils worse than nuts and seeds?
I'm not sure that I want to make a contest out of that. I don't know that there's a study that was able to tell me to give you the answer to that.
But you feel that nuts, seeds, avocados, and oils. Well, let's forget the oil. But you're saying that seeds, nuts, and avocados are not part of your program.
No, there are partly because we do have chia seeds and we do have flaxseed meal.
Right. Okay. Dr. Campbell?
Yeah, let me add another little thing here that we should be considering, namely, and that is the difference between polyunsaturated fats and saturated fats. Saturated fats is the bad guys, according to the history and what we always assumed. In reality, from a biochemical, physiological point of view, the saturated fats are rather innocuous. And they're not that bad, quite frankly. The fats that really are troublesome, not in food, but when they're added, are the unsaturates. And the unsaturates can be omega-3s or omega-6s. And what nature is really designed for us is to have a ratio, the best ratio possible of the 6 to the 3s. 6 being pro-inflammatory, omega-3s being anti-inflammatory. And the ratio generally is around 2 to 3 to 1. The 6 to 3s, that's what seems to be associated with the best health outcome. And so I tend to believe from the data, from the evidence that added oils, that's the real problem. I'm not so concerned about the saturated fats because they're rather innocuous, biochemically speaking. It's the unsaturated things which in turn can be oxidized